So today we are going to talk about water, what we call the soup of life. And today, rather than kind of getting on my soapbox and kind of getting off on a tangent about different things that I have my personal feelings about, I'm going to simply look at what water is, not what it is, but what it does, and what some of the drawbacks of not having enough water in your system is. Because I think for most of you, I don't really need to convince you that water is important, because everyone talks about it. It's not just fitness professionals, doctors, whoever it may be that talks about it. Everyone says you got to drink water, got to drink water. And so I don't need to probably convince you that taking in a lot of water, drinking a lot of water is good, but I hope through me kind of telling you some of the positives of proper retention fluid, and what some of the disadvantages of not taking enough water. I hope through that you can see why you need to take it in, to understand why people tell you to take in enough water, and because of that, once you understand the importance of taking in water, then you're going to want to take in more. So water, which is the soup of life, on average, just real generally, and water is a lot like everything else. Water is a lot like carbohydrates, fat, all that stuff. And the fact that it all depends on the person. The amount of water really depends on the individual, their goals, their activities, all that. But on the average, typically we're looking somewhere in the range of about 100 ounces per day, a little less than a gallon. And typically, and I'll get into the specific reasons on why about fat loss, but typically if you're in a fat loss period or a fat loss stage, you need about an extra 8 ounces for every 25 pounds additionally that you have. So that would be an extra 200, a 200-pound person would need an extra 80 ounces or up to 180 ounces a day. And after we kind of tell some of the reasons why, you're probably going to be able to understand why when you diet you do need more water. Also, other types of people that do need more water is those that are doing strenuous activity, especially athletes, anyone engaged in any sort of athletic activity, long distance running, hardcore training. You sweat, and fluid is released through sweating, and through urinating and other things, post exercise, and so therefore more water, depending on the amount of exercise and the intensity of the exercise, also needs to increase. And we're going to talk about that, specifically too, about how to do that as well. And also, the other indicator is the climate will dictate the amount of water that you need to consume. Obviously, in cold climates where you don't sweat a whole lot, not a whole lot of excess water needs to be taken in. But in hot climates where you are sweating or working outdoors, more water does definitely need to be taken in. So those are all different factors: climate, weight loss or fat loss, and any sort of strenuous activity, athletic activity, intense activity, that all needs to increase your water intake as well. And pretty much most people know that the human body, the majority of it is made up of water. About 60% of all human body is by weight of water. So I've written down some things I'm going to read off to you as far as the benefits of taking in water, or what water does into your system. And there's some pretty big ones. It's a foundational thing, on why water is so important. Some of the things I've listed is your endocrine functions improve, and if you don't want to know what that is, just Google that and look at what endocrine functions are. But that improves. Your fluid retention is alleviated, so it actually can help you. A lot of people think that if they take in less water, especially bodybuilders, if I take in less water, I'm going to retain more fluid. When in reality, you can decrease your fluid retention by taking in more water. Your liver function improves by taking in more water. Natural thirst, the more water you ingest, the more your thirst is going to decrease. Your big ones for dieters: if you're trying to lose weight or trying to maintain your weight and you don't want to put on fat, your appetite decreases the more water you take in. Your metabolic functions improve. So if you want to get your metabolism, I wrote a blog post today on Share Care, and basically was saying the number one regulator to your metabolism is how much muscle you have. But if you want to get your metabolic rate to improve, you drink more water. That can definitely improve that, because there's a couple things that we're going to talk about as far as nutrients and the processing of food in your system. That's improved by water as well. The amount of nutrient absorption, or the amount of how well your body absorbs nutrients, is improved by taking in more water. You can regulate your body temperature much more easily by how much water you're taking in, or an adequate amount of water. And your blood volume is also maintained much easier. So those are very fair. It's not, those are things that we're talking about that are above and beyond just how you look and how much fat you have and whether you're losing weight. Those are major fundamental things that you have to do. In a little bit, we're going to talk about the opposite of hydration is dehydration. And so we're going to talk about some of the drawbacks on what happens when you're dehydrated. But the most important thing to remember, though, is your body cannot adapt to dehydration. Your body is so incredibly adaptive towards everything else, towards your surroundings, towards your activity levels, towards your food intake, towards, psychological things. Your body's very adaptive, but one thing it's not adaptive to is dehydration. Your body needs water. It cannot survive more than a couple days without water. And the other thing too is that thirst alone is a poor indicator to what your hydration or dehydration levels. It's you don't want to simply go on thirst, and that's why it is important to put in calculations or mathematical equations on looking at how much water you do need. When we're talking about specifically exercise, and we might get into this a little bit further later, but during exercise, I've seen countless people, and I'm sure you have too, people that will go into the gym and will work out, and they'll step on the scale after working out, and they'll be like, oh wow, I just lost a pound, or I just lost 2 pounds. Well, all you did is dehydrated yourself, and you did nothing more. It takes, literally usually about a couple days to lose 1 pound of fat. You can't lose a pound of fat in an hour. So any of the weight that you've lost during that time is water weight. So really, your goal, from pre-workout to post-workout is to weigh about the same. You don't want to leave the gym or leave whatever activity you're doing, running outside, whatever it may be, and weigh less than you did at the beginning of the activity. So one of the things I encourage people to do is to weigh themselves before activity, to weigh themselves before whatever exercise they're doing, and then weigh themselves immediately after, because if they're down in weight, they need to rehydrate themselves. I mean, most importantly, a couple things that I have written down is you should consume water before exercise. You kind of almost, I would say about 20 ounces of water is normal, but if you consume, if you can bet on losing about a pound during exercise, then taking in about 20 ounces of water, roughly around a pound, is going to almost preempt what you're going to be doing. So you gain a pound before exercise, and then throughout the course of the exercise you lose it through drinking. And if you sweat more during the course of the exercise, then drinking a little bit of fluid during your workout can help to maintain that. But don't wait till after your workout while you're dehydrated to rehydrate yourself. And look back to some of those things that we were talking about as far as metabolic function, absorbing nutrients. Think about what would happen during your body during exercise if you were dehydrated. So if you are properly hydrated, you go into exercise, you dehydrate yourself, think about your body after exercise. However, if you're proactive at the beginning of your workout, hydrate yourself properly and kind of estimate, and that's a test. You have to see how much weight you typically lose during your workout and then do that appropriately. About 20 ounces per pound loss. So if you typically lose 2 pounds during your workout, you might need to take in 40 ounces, or 20 ounces before and 20 ounces during. That's a really important thing to do. But we're going to talk about specifically some things that happens negatively when you're dehydrated. And the following happens. The following are decreased when you're dehydrated. You have a decreased blood volume. You have decreased performance. So that's why it's important to have water before you train, enough water before you train. Decreased blood pressure, which isn't always good. Decreased sweating rate. Decreased cardio output, and decreased blood flow to the skin, which is a big reason why people get flushed and so forth. One thing it can do is it can increase your core temperature. If you're working out, it's pretty easy to get overheated if you're not taking in enough water. It can increase your heart rate. If you're trying to be more efficient in your training and trying to think about the higher your heart rate is, the harder it is to push through workouts. So you want to be, the whole key is to train hard, keep your heart rate low, the harder you train. So increased water will help you, to keep that heart rate from going up. It also, dehydration will increase perceived exertion. So the more dehydrated you are, the more you're going to feel like you're exerting when you're really not. It's just dehydration. And also, it increases your use of muscle glycogen, which will decrease performance. So the more glycogen you have in your body, the more readily available it is to use, the better your performance will be. So if your body is dehydrated and rapidly depletes your stored glycogen, it's going to decrease your performance. And what dehydration can also do, which huge issues with people for health, weight, cosmetically, is it can increase sodium retention and cause water retention. And so if you want to have less sodium retention, less water retention, make sure you properly hydrate yourself before training, throughout the day, and some of these little tips that we have talked about. Now, as far as sports drinks are concerned, for endurance athletes who are not trying to lose weight and are working out for more than 60 minutes, and they are not necessarily concerned about weight loss but concerned about performance, then drinks that not only replenish fluid but also replenish glycogen through sugars and carbohydrates, sport drinks are good for people who train more than an hour and for people that are looking for performance. Those that are looking for weight loss, fat loss, should simply preempt themselves before training, during training, and then after training to replenish with water. And so typically, that weighing yourself before training and then weighing yourself after training, if by chance, if you haven't properly hydrated yourself before training or during training and you're a half a pound to a pound lighter at the end of your workout, typically, remember, 20 ounces per pound that you've lost should be rehydrated, or anything that is to replace any sweat or urine loss during working out. And one other thing too is when we're talking about dietary things, is that one of the reasons why you increase water intake during dieting, not only to help with digestion, helping with the absorption of different minerals and different nutrients, and also the macronutrients throughout your body, helping the processing of carbohydrates, fats, proteins, is it takes about, I believe the last time I read, 7 times the amount of water to metabolize protein than it does carbohydrates. It takes a lot more water for that to happen, for protein versus carbohydrates. And it's a big reason why high protein diets cause you to be more thirsty. So that is one of the reasons. Typically, most fat loss diets will be accompanied with higher protein intake, and therefore more water intake is also needed at that time. I really appreciate you joining us today. That's kind of wraps up the basis for protein, carbohydrates, fat, water. And tomorrow we're going to talk about body composition, re-talk about body composition and how to use nutrition to alter body composition. Have a great day.
When you feel that something's wrong, I'll shelter you and keep you warm.